If you really want to get something done, you need to make it an assignment and not an option. That's it. That's the theory. That's why I'm gonna just take my own advice for once and make this whole video in 1 week, and I'm gonna score the whole thing using just one piece of equipment. When it comes to creative advice, I think we all know the usual suspects. Things like show up and try and create something every day, always stay inspired, learn to love the process, and all that other fluffy, cutesy bullshit that is usually stamped on some influencer merch or something. But this video isn't about the normal advice. This is about the dark horse of creative advice, I guess, that I think is the thing that really took me from someone who does this stuff on the side to someone who does this stuff as a professional. Stravinsky once said, "The more constraints one imposes, the more one frees oneself, and the arbitrariness of the constraint serves only to obtain precision of execution." And this idea has been applied across basically all creative pursuits. Things like the famous 6-word story, Matisse making paper cutouts after becoming sick and bedridden, which then became some of his best-known artwork, Brian Eno having to compose the Windows 95 startup sound with only a few seconds of music, Miles Davis writing Kind of Blue with modality instead of focusing on traditional chord progressions, Austin Kleon and the newspaper blackout poems, or even someone like Django Reinhardt, who had a really unfortunate accident, was left with only 2 fingers to play the guitar and ended up mastering it more than most people. I've been a full-time creator now for about 7 years, and I've learned a lot of things during that time, especially when it comes to the habits that I think make me successful in what I do. And I think this might be the most important one that I've developed. And it's not just me. I asked a couple of my fellow creatives about this same system, and every single one of them was in agreement that if there's one habit you develop to become a professional creator, this is the one.
Limitations are definitely an important part of the creative process. I think it's essential.
I find that the more options I have, the more I'm likely to give up on a project. So a good solution to that for me has been to impose pretty much arbitrary limitations.
Well, I think limitations are kind of unavoidable. In music, we really admire people who push boundaries, but I think it's important for us to acknowledge that in order to push boundaries, we have to have boundaries to begin with.
I happen to think limitations help my creative process personally because today there's just so much of everything. I actually start every project or piece of music by simply shrinking down the sandbox that I'm looking to play in. And for me, that's what makes the process really fun and exciting because now you're forced to think about each instrument differently.
Yeah, I think limitations are very, very important because let's face it, DAWs do a million more things than you actually need in order to finish songs.
And some of the world's most successful creatives have even chimed in on the idea of restriction being a vital part of the creative process.
He actually took one look at my squiggly line and said, well, why don't you just embrace the shake? So I did. And even though it wasn't the kind of art that I was ultimately passionate about, it felt great.
If you had all the money in the world and forever to shoot it, would it be a better film?
No. I think the restrictions that I had were so important.
I absolutely hated homework as a kid, but I think it was one of the most useful things about music school. I mean, granted I dropped out, but still. All homework is a system of restraints in place to achieve a desired outcome with a deadline applied. It could be something like you need to draw a school bus using only basic shapes. You have to solve for X, or you have to take 5 pictures of something with lines in black and white. None of this is really a new idea either. I mean, back in the 1990s, Lars von Trier and Thomas Vinterberg started a filmmaking movement called Dogma 95, where directors purposefully limited themselves with a very strict set of rules. And given that we're talking about it here, I'm sure it doesn't surprise you to learn that some of their most successful films came out of those restrictions. Realistically, whether it's painting or photography or making music or cooking or choreography or whatever, with this system in place, you can do all of these things any number of ways, but it's in the doing where you really get to be creative. I think the thing that just blows my mind about this idea is that the results are all the same, even though they're different. In the project management world, you'll hear a lot about Parkinson's Law, and it's something I try to live by. It says, work expands to fill the time available for its completion. Personally, I find a lot of the times for me, options are what kill results when it comes to creative work. And I guess, in maybe a roundabout way, what this system is really about is just establishing a framework to get that sense of creative momentum going. And I think it's easy to understand why, when we as creators don't apply any restrictions to what we're doing, especially in something like the domain of time, it's really hard to actually get anything done. I think it goes without saying that creators often get more creative with constraints in place than if they had total freedom. Because, I mean, they have to. I think this is ultimately why, with creativity, it all boils down to one sort of universal truth. Relying on your imagination is not the same thing as actually using it. So I guess the question now becomes, how do you use this system for yourself as a creator? And in my mind, I think this really just boils down to a 5-step process. First, you reword your idea as an assignment and just be reasonably specific. Then, you just figure out your goals with the idea. What is it that you want to make? Next, you break down the idea into smaller, more actionable steps. Then, you set the tools you have to execute the idea. There are a lot of different tools that you can use to impose creative restraints, with things like limiting your color palette, or maybe a set of ingredients for a recipe, or maybe the number of tracks you allow yourself to record a song with. One of my personal favorite tools, though, for creative restrictions is something like the oblique strategy card set. Anyways, we're getting off topic. So finally, you want to set a time frame to complete the project. And this part is really damn important. With this whole homework theory thing, though, I guess it's important to remember that this isn't an answer, and I can't provide you one when it comes to how to truly get out and be a creative and make something of yourself. And there isn't an answer, and anyone who says they have one is probably just trying to sell you something. I guess it's kind of like that lady in the gas station off Route 11 told me in between spits of chaw in her sody bucket about evolution. It's just a theory. But with homework, you do have to turn it in, and there is a deadline. So maybe with that, it's time for you to get off this video and get to work.